Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of First. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. Our podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. In today's episode, we talked to my friend, Nadia Bettac. Now, as you know, we celebrate first on this podcast, but today we're going to make an assumption that Nadia is the first Guyanese Austin Bar Director and Austin Young Lawyers Director. The reason it's an assumption is we've never really talked about this group before, and we don't have any evidence to the contrary. Nadia has nearly 15 years' experience as a trial attorney and now is the owner of Bettac Advocacy and Mediation, LLC. She's a graduate of the University of Texas and Barry University School of Law and is licensed to practice in Texas and Florida. Nadia has been an adjunct professor and mock trial coach at UT Law for over a decade, where she pays it forward to current students. She's active in the Travis County Women Lawyers Association, a barrister in the Robert W. Calvert Inn of Court, served on the board of directors of the Austin Young Lawyers Association, where a very smart AYLA president named her outstanding director, and served as director of the Austin Bar Association and co-chair of the Gala, which last year made a record amount of money. Some of you may have Nadia's experience, so this will be a different but important conversation, and I'm very happy to have with me today my friend, Nadia Bettac.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I want to start with our first question we ask everybody. Why did you want to be a lawyer?
Well, I actually wanted to be president first.
But the United States?
The United States.
There's still time.
I think I will pass on that job. So when I was younger, I had no idea of anything about law, but when you were in school, you used to have to watch the State of the Union address and then also the presidential debate. So I was like, oh, I want to be these people because I love arguing. But I didn't know that most of these people are lawyers. So I kind of got my first introduction to it when my mom was volunteering at a women's shelter. And it was part of National Honor Society. If you remember back in the day, you had to do volunteer work. So I would join her there at the shelter. And I saw a bunch of women who would have to get prepared to go to court, whether it was a hearing or a TRO, they had to go testify. And so I kind of got a taste of what is all this about? What is this legal system? And then in college, I took a domestic violence course, and I quickly learned that that area of law was probably not going to be for me. Though I think anyone who advocates for these women and the choices that they have to make in leaving their families and helping them through the court process, they have a way stronger heart than I do to deal with all the emotions on that. So that's kind of where I wanted it to be. I wanted to be president and try to figure out the route to do that. And that's how I ended up going to law school. I also wasn't doing well in OChem. Yeah, when I figured out that math and organic, you have to pass organic chemistry to go to med school. Yeah, I was like, no, I'm done.
Well, I'm impressed with whatever school system you grew up in where you had to watch the State of the Union and the presidential debates, because we did not have that in the Valley.
I went to Friendswood High School, which is very competitive, and they pride themselves on being, I don't even know what the standard is now, but back in the day, it was exemplary schools of Texas, right? And so they made us highly competitive students.
This I know about you. So you have spent a lot of time being a trial attorney, and you were typically doing insurance defense, and now you're the owner of your own business. Why did you want to be the owner of a business?
I wanted to be an owner of a business because I came to the point in my career where litigation was becoming extremely stressful. And then working for some of these companies and having your voice heard within the companies to make changes or to better our profession wasn't necessarily being heard. I've served on actually some DEI positions in some of these companies or committees to get our process and strategies better. But oftentimes I found that the end solution didn't really meet the workers' needs. And so trying to balance it all became a struggle. And I decided that for years I put it off. I was like, I can never be a boss. Like, it's a lot of work. And I've talked to other people who had their own law firms, and, they did talk about the struggle, but they also said it was very rewarding. And at a certain point, I made the decision that it's either now or never. And I had the support of my family and my friends, and especially my husband, Chad, to just do it now. just do it now, start your own business, and let's see where this goes. And I chose mediation because I think it offers kind of the best of both worlds. I had the litigation experience, and I love litigation in that aspect of trial strategy, processes, like how do we get this done? And I thought mediation would be the best way to pursue that avenue without the day-to-day stress of litigation.
Well, and what I hope that people sort of take away from your experience is you don't just have to sit around in a job that you're frustrated with every day. You can make a change. I worked for state government for a long time, and I have friends who will literally count the day till retirement, and they'll say, well, in 10 years and 4 months and 12 days, I can retire. And that's just not the way to live. And so I'm glad for you that you made a choice that makes you happy, even though it was a little bit scary to take the jump.
Right. I think we had that mindset, right? When I was going to law school, same with you, like people just stuck with one legal job. And I think part of that also comes from my upbringing with my parents and how they view things. You go to work, you do everything your boss says, and you just, keep your head down, don't make any waves, and you work at that one job forever. And the reality is, and what we learned more so with COVID too, is that you don't have to stay in one place. And you can find your voice and your meaning. And for my situation, it happened to be hang my own shingle, but other people job hop, they find better employers who offer better packages, the ability to work remote. Like that is not a thing anymore, that you have to be loyal to an employer, even if you're unhappy.
Yeah, I like that you can find your voice, because the alternative is just sitting around and being frustrated. So you might as well find it and then take action on it. Okay, so now the part that is going to be most complicated, I think, for our audience to understand, but it's complicated for you as well. You are Guyanese, which is something that in Texas not everybody understands. So I have been with you throughout the years when you've been misidentified as South Asian or Hispanic and probably a bunch of other things. So tell me how you best find your community and your place in it.
I don't think I've found it yet, at least here, not in Texas. Because if there are other Guyanese people, they're either living in Dallas or in Houston. In Austin, we don't have quite that community. I've found that there's other Caribbean people here that exist, but in terms of family being from Guyana, South America, that is very rare to come across someone who has that same experience, and especially here in the legal community. I've been back in Austin since 2010, and I have not come across another person who is Guyanese and a lawyer, first generation like myself. So it means that I have to borrow from other communities. And the one that's reached out the most is the South Asian Saba community. And I appreciate them. Obviously, I look like I relate to them. People from Guyana, the British brought over people from India to work on the sugarcane fields. Just a lot of documentation got lost. We don't really know where we are from in India, and our culture, our food, our experiences are two different things. So while I may look like my friends and counterparts from India, when it comes to the day-to-day food, the culture, the upbringing, they're a little bit different, I would say. And so it's hard to be like, I'm going to be part of this group when there are still differences there. And because this group is so small, there's not someone else to share those differences with me, to be like, oh, well, this is our food. Which I found as well, too, when I was growing up in Friendswood, we started a group called the Culture Club. And it was myself, another person, and she was Indian background, and then another person with a Pakistani background. And we wanted to bring awareness to a predominantly Caucasian school that brown people exist, and we have a different experience, different food. And so we'd have monthly meetings. And I think the best way to communicate culture is through food. And so we brought food every month. It was a different kind of food, or if it was around a holiday, we would celebrate the holiday and invite people to come to the meetings after school. What I found interesting, though, the people that would come to the meetings were all the minorities. We didn't have very many white people come to the meetings, but we thought we were successful. We spread awareness and we got a page in the yearbook. So
I love that idea of the culture club and of borrowing from the other communities, because we have a lot in common with how we were brought up with our families. And I'm from South Texas. So that borrowing, I think, helps maybe to unite you with some of these groups. But I can see how, I think we're going to need to do, a call for the audience. If you know Guyanese people, let us know. We need a Guyanese bar association. We need, and Nadia will be the owner and founder of that too. Because there has to be, you can't be the only person in Austin. We just haven't figured out how to reach them yet, I think.
Right. And which was interesting because at a lot of these bar events that we have here, I've been participating in the bar since I moved back, because one of the ways I found to meet people was through joining Austin Young Lawyers Association, because I didn't go to law school here. And it was the same thing I did in Florida too when I graduated law school. I was like, I got to connect with other attorneys doing what I'm doing, trying to find a job, whatever it may be. And at all of the events, it happens, at least with the Austin Bar, it's the same people, the same community, and not really too many new members joining that community. And I think it was the first time I saw a really big diversity is when I went to the Texas Minority Council happy hour that they were doing in each big city leading up to the big CLE. And I was like, there's more of us out here. There are more minorities out here in Austin living, doing the law thing like I'm doing, but they don't come out to the general events. I don't know why that is, why we don't see them, but it was so great. And the mariachi band was great. The food was great. But having those like shared experiences that, yeah, there are other minorities out there. They're just not showing up here in this legal community. So I want to know how we can bring them out.
I feel like there are people that are listening that will want to help you with that, whether it is specifically Guyanese or just a place for minority attorneys to gather. I think that we can do that for you. So I'm going to put that on my list, and we'll put that in the podcast note. So you didn't go to UT for law school, and I understand for some folks, it seems a little bit like everyone in Austin went to UT, so everyone already has a leg up of knowing each other. And you have been associated with the law school for a long time, paying it forward with the mock trial students. Why is that important to you to give back in that way?
Because someone did it for me. Well, I did undergraduate mock trial at UT, and we were very successful. And we had a group called the Texas Devil's Advocates. And yeah, our logo was an actual devil. And it was very funny when you would try to recruit members, and everyone was, what is this devil? They thought we were devil worshippers. And
yeah, I mean, it honestly sounds like a roller derby team name.
Yes. But we were very good at, like, it was like a bunch of misfits. It's probably the wrong word to use, but we had a bunch of kids at UT. We would have these meetings where we play Texas Hold'em, drink beer, and then also prepare for these undergraduate mock trial packets, and we were pretty good at it. And then a lot of the students went on to law school, and we coached ourselves. And so someone donated their time, the older students donated their time to coach me. And then when I got to law school, believe it or not, I really suck at school. So I found that I'm very good at practical things. So when I did my trial, it was easier for me to understand procedure, and it was easier for me to understand evidence rather than sitting in an evidence class or sitting in a civil procedure class. And so my mock trial coach took the time to develop those skills. I've had moot court as well. My moot court professor, who's also my legal writing professor, who is also one of my friends. We've stayed in touch throughout the years. Professor Kalinsky took the time outside of their family, their kids, to teach us. And I thought that was very important because they made a really big impact on my legal career. Because if it was based on my scores for the LSAT, or it was based on my GPA, I wouldn't be practicing law.
I think one of the things that you hear in law school is school actually has nothing to do with being a lawyer, and your grades have nothing to do with what it's going to be like to be a lawyer. And at least in Texas, I heard that there was a law school for any student that was interested. And I do think that's true because there are some people, you watch the different law school movies, and it's just like nerds in blazers who are excited to read and learn the Constitution. And I'm sort of like you, that didn't sound fun at all. But clinics and getting part-time jobs, that was actually a lot more satisfying than just, let us read the book and spout off what's it said in the footnote. Like that wasn't a meaningful way for me to learn either. And that's actually not how real life lawyering works.
No. I mean, even when you're in the courtroom, all of the stuff that even the case law you have 10 seconds to open your mouth and make your best argument. And it's not coming from what you recited out of your law book. It is coming from your day-to-day experience, what you know about your case and what you know supports it. And that's all the time you have to think on your feet. And I think there's a huge difference being able to be in the classroom and reciting what's in front of you in a book versus thinking on your feet in front of a judge and presenting your best argument for your client.
At UT Law School, do they still have, as part of Board of Advocates, mediation and negotiation competitions?
I believe so, yes.
That is the path I took in law school, and I thought it was hilarious to compete about negotiations. And so I always thought that did not get as much attention as mock trial and moot court, but my partner, who's one of my best friends in law school, and we had a great time kicking butt at mediation and negotiation, which seems counterintuitive, but we liked it.
Well, I think that's great because it is a different skill set between arguing at court versus mediation and negotiation. And I think that's what kind of makes you successful in your position, because you have to bring the parties to the table to, even when it's reviewing a contract, right? And everyone wants something in the contract. And if you're like, no, that's not going to get it done. But if you are having that viewpoint and you're negotiating or mediating the agreement, then that's how it gets done. But you just can't come out there. It's a different style. You can't come out there and yell at people and be like, why aren't you doing this? Because it says this. No, that's a completely different, it's more of a counseling position. And yes, you know what the end game should be. And you're smart enough to get the people to talk and focus and get them to an agreement. That's an admirable skill. So
I remember there was one competition. It was an accident, but our opposing team was from North Carolina and they went first. And I will mimic people and their accents. And as soon as I started talking, I had a country accent. And my partner, Jenny, looked at me and started glaring at me. And I was like, oh, no. I now have to do this for the next 2 hours so that they don't think I was making fun of them. But at least since they kept talking, they kept feeding my country accent. And it just kept going. And the professor was furious that I did it and furious that we still won that round. So that I have stopped trying. I have stopped mimicking people as soon as I hear their accents. It wasn't meant to be mean. It just came out. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, no.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do. We got yelled at by our mock trial coach. I was a witness for a round when I was in law school. And we went up to a school that had an accent and was very slowly drawn. And we're coming from the East Coast, Florida. And we slowed down our whole case. And he was so mad. And he's like, you don't play to the opponent's level. So I definitely have had that experience and equally yelled at by your coach.
And I bet you still won. So
yes, we won.
It's hard to learn the lesson when you did something you weren't supposed to and you still were good at it. But kids, don't do the accent. No, don't repeat the country accent or the slower accent. So Nadia, I know some of this answer, I think, but what organizations have meant the most to you personally or professionally?
Oh my gosh, yes. You have graciously asked me to follow your presidency in both AYLA and the Austin Bar. And I think we've made significant impacts and changes when we have spent our time on those boards. I will go back to being on AYLA and doing Runway for Justice. That was a very, very fun event. Something that was new. It was refreshing. We connected the young lawyers with the older lawyers too. That it was outside of the judicial reception, right? And we got to see a lot of judges, a lot of older, skilled lawyers let their hair down a little bit and walk the runway, which I thought was great.
Will you remind people what Runway for Justice was?
Yeah. So we did a fashion show and we invited all of the lawyers to be models. At the time, it was male and female models, and Brittany Stanford was excellent in making sure that everyone got dressed. We had swag bags, so we pretended it was a real runway show, and they got to model 3 different styles. And we had an evening with drinks and snacks, and everyone had fun for a few hours pretending we had a lawyer fashion show. And of course, the money went to benefit the foundation. So it was a great time. I think if we were to do it now, we would probably make some changes. But at the time, it was a unique event, and I think a fun one for everyone.
Well, and I would assume there was another AYLA project, Retro Vegas. I would assume that that project was important to you personally because, from what I recall, you met your husband at that event.
That is true. Through Austin Kaplan, yes.
And he's not a lawyer, but went to a lawyer event.
Yes, in which he was not told that there was a cover at the door, and he only had his credit card, and he will tell the story to everyone. And I happened to be at the door and was able to get him in once I alerted Austin that, yes, there's this guy at the door who said you did not tell him there was $100 cover. Go help him out. So I met him through that. We did not actually talk that night. He followed up because I had changed my Facebook profile picture to the Elvis impersonator and myself. And he said, if Elvis is not your boyfriend, would you like to go get beer?
Oh, I love that story. Good job, Chad. I know Chad must be listening. So you might have a different perspective on this question, given that you don't fall into one specific category, but it's the fall of 2023. How do you think the Austin legal community is doing in terms of diversity?
I think we still have work to do. I know that we kind of talked a little bit before doing this podcast that going to other events outside of the Austin Bar and outside of Austin Young Lawyers Association, there are a lot more minorities out there. And I will say there are some other significant organizations, Travis County Women Lawyers Associations. The other night, I got an introduction to Cafecitos, a Hispanic Bar Association, that have such a diverse membership group and they have lots to offer and experiences that we don't hear from in just the 2 main bar associations here. And I think we need to do more things that either co-partner with them or get them to overlap so that their voice is heard. Voice is very important to me because I've never really had the ability to have a platform where my voice could be heard. And even now it is, as a female litigator, it was always a struggle. You're always the court reporter. You're always the paralegal and never the lawyer. And so what makes it also worse, not just being a female litigator, but a minority female litigator, you don't get the time of the day. You don't get a seat at the table. And I want these minority organizations to have a seat at the table. They deserve to be heard, and they shouldn't have to just have that be in their own groups, affiliate groups. They need to have that heard at the big bar and statewide too.
Well, and that's why, at least for the Austin Bar Association, most of those groups do have an official board seat at the table. Your point about, though, whether there is time to collaborate and have those discussions at the meetings is well taken. And we tried to do more of that starting last year. Because I agree, there is such great programming that all of these groups do, but we don't hear about them because the Austin Bar and AYLA are so busy pumping out our own content. But that merger and that discussion really is important to be doing together.
I also think it's important that we reach out to other people that are not the same people over and over again that we tap out to. there can be more than one person that represents the Hispanic voices or the Indian voices, or hopefully finding a Guyanese person to represent the
I found one.
another Guyanese person or Caribbean person to represent the voice. Because yes, I think it's great that we have a speaker, but there's, even within the Hispanic community or Indian community or Caribbean community, there's a diversity within the voices. Everyone's experience is a little different. So how do we highlight that and elevate that by bringing that? And even through the podcast, I mean, you've had a diverse group on the Council of First podcast. Everyone has a little bit different background and story to offer. And I think it's great because not one Hispanic person experience is the same. Not one Indian person's experience is the same, and they don't speak on behalf of the entire community. So having a variety of voices, I think, would be also great for the bar to strive for.
So we need to take your culture club from high school.
Yes.
And put it somewhere in the Austin legal community.
That would be great. And who doesn't like food?
Everybody does. Everybody does. We'll just have to put it somewhere where everyone can bring their food potluck.
Yes. A giant. So if anyone, any of the law firms have like a big enough conference room,
we'll bring you all of the different foods that we make at our house, whether or not they represent our culture.
Yeah. I mean, we can even pick like one item and everyone makes their own version, like roti. We talked about roti, right? There are so many different rotis out there, and the ways to make them, like even in Guyanese, no one writes anything down. So it's a handful of this, a pinch of that, and nobody knows how to make anything except for how it feels. And so how it feels from Nadia's house versus how it feels from so-and-so's house is going to be two different rotis.
I have a great aunt that taught my mom and I how she made empanadas and pan de polvo. And she used a handful of flour and then a handful of boiling water. And she stuck her hand in that boiling water. And I thought, do I have to do that? And then my mom was like, no, see, she's using just the same measurement. So it could just be like a cup of each. And I thought, okay, because I don't know if we can measure her hand. Didn't occur to me yet how cooking worked and how those measurements worked. But I was very impressed by her working hand.
Her hand might have some like different like feelings or whatever. She has an extra special seasoning in there, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, after she passed away, what my sister and I asked for is she had these great cast iron skillets, and so we each have one, and so it has 100 years of seasoning and whatever her hands wanted to make with it. So what advice would you give to attorneys in the legal community who want to get involved but don't know how?
I found that the Young Lawyers Association has always been a great stepping stone. Because everyone has kind of the same mindset when you're starting out at the young lawyers level, right? Everyone's either trying to find a job, trying to network, or they want to meet new people like socially because they don't have any friends. They've just moved to Austin. They didn't go to law school here. So I think that's a great stepping stone. But then once you start meeting other people through the Young Lawyers Association, like some of the older attorneys, don't be afraid to ask them to coffee. Don't be afraid to say, can we grab lunch? And some of us are super busy and you may have to remind us, but I'm open. And I always tell my mock trial students, I'm not just your mock trial coach for this thing. I'm your mentor for life because someone did it for me. Someone did it for me, spent their time, and I'm happy to do that because this legal world is crazy. We didn't all have the same resources, the same experience. No one, before I went to law school, no one in my family went to law school. So I didn't have anyone to ask the tough questions. I didn't have anyone to guide me. And I know there's some lawyers in the community. They're, years of legacy and lawyers, and I didn't have that. So if you are new, or even if you do have that, but you're not comfortable, you want to have a different viewpoint, reach out to your Young Lawyers Association, reach out to me. I'm happy to tell you all the things.
I think the hashtag for your episode is going to be mentor for life with a 4.
Yes.
Nadia is going to mentor you whether you ask her for the advice or not.
I've been character references for people's bar application. I've been the phone call that is, I want to change careers. What do I do now? I've had, students who have cried because things didn't go out the way that it's planned for them or what they thought law school was going to be. Like, I've helped do it But having that ear and have someone listen to you is cathartic. And sometimes you can't tell the people back home what maybe you're going through because they're not there. And they're just like, why can't you just go to law school and be successful? Why can't you just be a successful lawyer? I don't understand it. And you need someone who's going to understand that there is a mental health aspect to this profession. There is. It is not just, going to school and going to class and doing the things. There are other layers there, which I think our profession is starting to recognize and is becoming more normal to talk about. But we're not there yet 100%.
It would be interesting to know. I know that the youth these days are more likely to talk about issues, but when I was in law school, no one would have done that. No one would have admitted that they had a challenge or a problem or any weakness at all. So I wonder if that's changed and if the kids these days are more open to doing that.
I would hope so. And I would hope that you can kind of see it with, again, going back to the pandemic too. Some of the employers did embrace that change, the challenge of, regardless of having kids, people who were single, working from home, not having socialization with anyone also struggled. And I think employers recognize that. They tried to change their policies to embrace that, or giving mental health days off, or offering different types of health insurance. When I was at Farmers, they offered us Headspace. I don't know if people still use Headspace, but the app to kind of help us get through it, which I think was a great recognition on the employers. And so if the older attorneys also recognize that too, I think they're also a valuable resource because, yeah, we can tell you how it was, but we also realize that there needed to be a change so we can guide you on how do you make those changes.
Nadia, what's next for you?
Oh, gosh. I'm hoping to continue on with this mediation practice and make it successful. I don't know. I know there's other female mediators. I don't know that there's necessarily a Guyanese female mediator here in Austin. I think I am the first one, so I will put an asterisk and say in case someone reaches out to build this practice, because ultimately this mediation practice and what it stands for in terms of getting things done, providing a balance, adept, middle ground aspect of evaluating cases, I can provide that. And I think it's a healthy way to litigation and getting things resolved. It's also a need for our profession to have strong female leaders in the community. And I'm hoping I can be considered one of those strong female leaders. I don't want to just limit myself to the practice. I also volunteer a lot. I try to give back to a legal community, and that's something I've done since I was as I told you, since I was in high school, volunteering. I want to continue that aspect as well, giving back to the community and seeing where that goes. Business owner is got to be successful first. So hopefully, we're right in the early stages of this business. I do everything. I've never learned about accounting, and I'm doing accounting, scheduling, getting the cases resolved. And so I'm hoping that it grows, and I'm hoping that it's successful, and we'll see from there.
Well, since you sort of said this like it was a question, I want to make sure to end by saying, Nadia, you are a strong female leader in this legal community. We are lucky to have you. And I am interested to see if any of these other ideas about bringing minority lawyers together, and specifically minority females together, how we're going to do that under your leadership.
Wonderful.
So we'll bring you back when you have that solution.
I'm hoping to work with other people who have similar ideas, and then we can see what we can do, because I think it would be a benefit to our community.
I do too. Thank you so much for being here today, Nadia. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see y'all next time. Thanks.